Just a quick sound check. I had to switch microphones. Is it still working? Can I get a thumbs up? Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I just want to make you aware that we have gone live on Facebook, but we're waiting for YouTube and to confirm that other platforms are ready to go. So stand by for just one moment. Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I want to start by thanking you for joining us for this virtual public workshop. The subject of this workshop is the Draft Environmental Impact Statement, or Draft EIS, for the proposed replacement terminal project at Bob Hope Airport, or as some of you may know it, the Hollywood Burbank Airport. My name is Brian Armstrong. I'm the manager of the FAA's Airport Safety and Standards branch here in the Western Pacific region. I will be serving as the moderator for today's public workshop and as the public hearing official for the public hearing to be held tomorrow, September 24th. Public participation is an important component of the preparation of an EIS, and your participation today is very much appreciated. It is important for everyone to understand that the responsibility for preparing this EIS rests with the Federal Aviation Administration. The replacement passenger terminal has been proposed by the Burbank-Glendale-Pasadena Airport Authority, which we will be referring to as the authority this afternoon, in accordance with the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA. The FAA is responsible for preparing an independent review of the impacts associated with the proposed action. The FAA's review is documented in the draft EIS that was published on August 21st, 2020. We realize that this public workshop would normally be conducted in person, but given the COVID-19 public health emergency, we are holding this public workshop virtually. So before we get started, I want to outline our agenda for today's workshop, tell you how you can ask questions, and introduce you to our expert panel that will be responding to your questions today. First, we have a pre-recorded presentation that provides information about the purpose and need of the project, the reasons why the authority is proposing to construct the replacement passenger terminal, the alternatives that were studied to meet the purpose and need for the project, a description of the components that make up the proposed project, and an overview of the impacts associated with the implementation and operation of the proposed project. This recorded presentation is about 20 minutes long, and we will play it at the end of these opening remarks. Following the recorded presentation, we will enter into a question and answer session. There are two ways to submit questions. The first was through the registration form on the project website when you registered to attend the workshop. We have collected those questions and have them ready for our panelists. The second method, which is for live questions submitted during this workshop, is to text your questions to the phone number on the screen, which is 818-798-1944. We will show that number several times throughout this evening as a reminder. If you are participating via YouTube, Facebook, or another streaming platform, please do not post any questions you want answered on those platforms. Given the complexity of all of the different platforms, we cannot guarantee that we will see your questions during this live workshop. Instead, please text your question to the number provided. Any comments you may have for consideration in the final EIS must be given orally at the public hearing tomorrow, submitted via the online comment form, or sent to us via US mail. So As I mentioned before, we have assembled a group of experts that are available to answer your questions today. Although I am serving as the moderator today, I may chime in on answers to some questions from time to time. Now I would like the rest of the panel to introduce themselves. Jaime, will you begin?
Sure thing. Good evening. My name is Jaime Duran. I am the lead planner in the Los Angeles Airports District Office of the FAA.
Okay, thank you, Jaime. Manson, will you go next?
Yes, my name is Manson Wong. I'm a program manager with FAA Los Angeles Airport District Office.
Okay, Michael.
Yes, good evening, everyone. I'm Michael Lamprecht, and I'm an environmental protection specialist working in headquarters in Washington, D.C. I work for the Airports Division.
Okay, Edvige.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Edvige Baku. I am an environmental protection specialist at the Los Angeles Airports District Office and the project manager for the EIS.
Yeah, fantastic. Heidi.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Heidi Roos, a director at Environmental Science Associates in Pasadena, California, a consultant to the FAA. I served as the technical lead for the assessment of air quality and climate impacts.
Okay, and finally, Patrick.
Good evening. My name is Patrick Lamberding. I'm the Deputy Executive Director of Planning and Development at the Hollywood Burbank Airport.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you all for being here. We very much appreciate the panelists taking their time to be here. In addition to our panelists, we have a number of people working behind the scenes to get your questions, to categorize them, and to combine them with other similar questions. Those people will provide those questions to me, and I will read out the questions for our panelists. If appropriate, to help you understand the response to any specific questions, our panelists may use exhibits that will be shown on the screen. So without further ado, we will show our recorded presentation. We can proceed with that. Thank you.
Welcome. This presentation is intended to inform you about the Draft Environmental Impact Statement, or Draft EIS, for the proposed replacement terminal project at Bob Hope Hollywood Burbank Airport. This presentation provides an overview of important information contained in the Draft EIS. These are the topics included in this presentation, which will be discussed in the order shown on the screen. The FAA is responsible for preparing the Draft EIS in compliance with the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA. Welcome.
Sorry about that. With minor technical difficulty, we'll get that video up.
Presentation is intended to inform you about the Draft Environmental Impact Statement, or Draft EIS, for the proposed replacement terminal project at Bob Hope Hollywood Burbank Airport. This presentation provides an overview of important information contained in the Draft EIS. These are the topics included in this presentation, which will be discussed in the order shown on the screen. The FAA is responsible for preparing the Draft EIS in compliance with the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA. The FAA is the lead federal agency for this project and must ensure that all NEPA requirements and policies are met. In addition, the FAA oversees the work of the EIS consultant in the preparation of the EIS. The Burbank-Glendale-Pasadena Airport Authority, or Authority, is the agency proposing the replacement passenger terminal project. The Authority is responsible for assisting the FAA by providing data used in the Draft EIS and assisting with public outreach efforts. This virtual public workshop, hosted by the FAA, is part of the NEPA process. The intent is to inform the public about the Draft EIS, allow the public to ask questions, and provide answers to those questions. The FAA will also host a separate virtual public hearing to accept formal oral comments on the Draft EIS. The public hearing will occur tomorrow from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. Registration to speak at the virtual public hearing is required, and registration forms can be found on the project website. As a reminder, the Draft EIS was published in the Federal Register on August 21, 2020, and is available for review and comment through October 27, 2020. The project website is the best location for accessing the Draft EIS. However, Hard copies are available for review at Burbank City Hall. This image shows the NEPA process. As you can see, we are at step 6 of the 9-step process. More information will be provided on the next steps later in this presentation. The Hollywood Burbank Airport is a medium hub commercial airport in Burbank, California. For ease of understanding, the airport is divided into 4 separate quadrants as determined by its 2 runways. The southeast quadrant contains the existing passenger terminal building, the Regional Intermodal Transit Center, and public parking. The southwest quadrant includes hangars and the cargo facilities. The northwest quadrant contains a number of hangars and the airport rescue and firefighting facility. The northeast quadrant is comprised of vacant land and surface parking lots. The purpose and need statement identifies the problem facing the authority and the proposed solution to the problem. The FAA developed this purpose and need statement to address our statutory mission as well as the airport sponsor's goals and objectives. The existing passenger terminal building does not meet current FAA standards related to runway separation and object-free areas. It is also obsolete in terms of contemporary passenger terminal design and efficient utilization standards, especially the current security needs. Furthermore, it does not meet current state building requirements. So, the purpose for the proposed action is to provide a passenger terminal building that meets all current FAA standards, passenger demand, and building requirements, as well as improve utilization and operational efficiency of the passenger terminal building. This exhibit illustrates how the existing passenger terminal does not meet current FAA standards. The table on the left side of the exhibit provides the FAA standards and how the existing passenger terminal does not meet them. The image on the right side of the exhibit graphically depicts the distances. For instance, the existing passenger terminal is inside the building restriction line standard, which is the green line on the image. The proposed action is to construct a new terminal building northeast quadrant. This is the location that was approved by City of Burbank voters in 2016 as part of Measure B. The NEPA process requires the identification and analysis of alternatives to the proposed action. As part of this effort, the draft EIS analyzes the proposed action and 9 other alternatives, which are shown on the screen. Some of the alternatives involve constructing a new airport or a new remote landside facility, transferring activity to other airports or other modes of transportation, or reconfiguring the airfield at the airport. Other alternatives look at the ability of constructing a replacement passenger terminal in each of the other quadrants of the airport. NEPA also requires the draft EIS to look at the no-action alternative. In other words, what would happen if nothing were constructed? The next exhibits show where a replacement passenger terminal could be constructed in each of the other 3 quadrants at the airport when applying the current FAA standards. This is the southeast quadrant, and the area available for a terminal is shaded in a light green color. Note that the Regional Intermodal Transportation Center is also located in this area. This is the southwest quadrant, and it shows the triangular area north of the railroad tracks that would be available for a replacement passenger terminal. For the northwest quadrant alternative, the replacement passenger terminal would replace the existing hangars and would be accessed by Sherman Way and Clybourne Avenue. Each alternative was subjected to a 2-step screening process to determine its viability. The first step determined whether the alternative would meet the purpose and need as discussed earlier in this presentation. The second step determined whether the alternative was practical and feasible to implement and whether it met the requirements of Measure B. 5 of the alternatives met the objectives of the purpose and need and were advanced to the second step of the process. The 5 alternatives that were not advanced did not meet current FAA standards, state building standards, or were not operationally efficient. The results of the second step of the screening process is shown here. Only the replacement passenger terminal in the northeast quadrant met the second step. None of the other alternatives met the requirements of voter-approved Measure B. In addition, as per NEPA requirements, the no-action alternative was also advanced for analysis in the draft EIS. There are 14 components that would need to be constructed for a replacement passenger terminal to be developed in the northeast quadrant. Not all of these project components require FAA approval, but all the project components would have to be constructed for the replacement passenger terminal to operate effectively. These 14 construction project components include the replacement passenger terminal, the aircraft apron, the replacement employee parking, the replacement structure public parking, and the valet drop-off and pickup area, the terminal access road, the realignment of Avenue A in the southeast quadrant, the replacement airline cargo building, the replacement aircraft rescue and firefighting facility, the ground service equipment maintenance building, the electric substation, the ground access vehicle storage, the extensions to taxiways A and C, the realignment of the airport service road, and the relocation of the shuttle bus dispatch office. In addition to construction, 11 demolition or removal project components would also need to occur, and these are shown here. These project components include the demolition of the existing passenger terminal building, the removal of the existing commercial aircraft apron and adjacent taxi lanes, the removal of the existing parking lot A, the removal of the existing employee parking lot, the removal of the existing parking booth, the removal of the existing parking lot B, the removal of the existing parking lot E, the demolition of the existing public parking structure, the removal of the tenant lease area, the demolition of the existing airline cargo and GSE maintenance building, and the removal of the shuttle bus dispatch office. Taken together, all of these construction and demolition project components comprise the proposed action for developing a replacement passenger terminal at the airport. The topics on this slide are the environmental resource categories that were analyzed in the draft EIS. The following slides will discuss the analysis contained in the draft EIS for the resource categories shown in bold italics. These resource categories were selected based on public interest and potential impacts that were identified in the draft EIS. The draft EIS used 2 study areas for analyzing impacts. The detailed study area is the same as the airport property and covers 555 acres. The general study area is much larger at 4,900 acres and was based on the current 65 decibel noise contour. The air quality analysis includes emission inventories prepared for both construction and operations for the no action alternative and the proposed action. The criteria pollutant emission inventories developed as part of this draft EIS use standard industry software models and federal, state, and locally approved methodologies. If approved, construction would start in 2021 and end in 2026. This would include demolition of the existing terminal building and the extension of taxiways A and C after the replacement passenger terminal building is completed and operational in 2024. Construction emissions generally occur from 3 sources: tailpipe exhaust, fugitive dust, and evaporative sources. Operational emissions are generated by 2 broad classes of sources: airside, which are those on the runway side of the terminal, for example, aircraft and ground support equipment, and landside, which include emissions from building and from vehicles accessing the passenger terminal. Operational emissions of criteria air pollutants were estimated for the proposed action and no action alternative for 2 study years, 2024 and 2029. The maximum combined construction and operational emissions inventory for 2024 for the proposed action are presented in the table shown on the slide. The net emissions value, which is highlighted in blue, was determined by subtracting the no action alternative emissions for 2024 from the proposed action emissions for 2024. As shown in the table, the increase in emissions from the combined construction and operational emissions from the 2024 proposed action would not exceed the de minimis thresholds for any criteria pollutant. As with the 2024 emissions inventory, the operational emissions inventory for the 2029 proposed action are analyzed after subtracting the no action alternative emissions for 2029. The differences represent project-related emissions and are compared to the appropriate threshold values. As shown in the table, the increase in operational emissions in 2029 would not exceed the applicable de minimis thresholds for any criteria pollutant. Because the proposed action would not exceed the applicable significance thresholds for any pollutants, mitigation measures would not be required. This analysis of greenhouse gas emissions generally follows the same methodology and assumptions as the air quality criteria pollutant emissions analysis. The aircraft fleet and its operations would be the same for the no action alternative, and the proposed action except for the change in taxiway distances that would occur with the proposed action. The proposed action combined construction and operational emissions in 2024 and would result in a net increase in greenhouse gas emissions of approximately 2,903 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalents compared to the no-action alternative. This increase in construction-generated emissions is approximately 1.52% more than the no-action alternative. This increase would comprise only approximately 0.0007% of California's 2017 total greenhouse gas emissions. The proposed action operational emissions would result in a net increase in greenhouse gas emissions of approximately 1,788 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalents compared to the no-action alternative in 2029. This increase, generated by the increase in terminal size heating and cooling, would represent approximately 1.1% more compared to the no-action alternative and equal to approximately 0.0004% of California's 2017 greenhouse gas emissions. There were 5 known contaminated sites on or near the airport property. They are the Lockheed plants A1 North, C1, B5, and B6, and the former Aviol sites. All 5 were used for various aircraft manufacturing and maintenance purposes, and used and stored various chemicals and hazardous materials. The proposed action site is located where the former B6 site was located. The proposed action site contains soils that were contaminated due to these previous activities. However, the Regional Water Quality Control Board deemed the site suitable for construction of the proposed action. Additionally, the exposure from previously contaminated soils to construction workers or the public is below U.S. EPA and Cal EPA acceptable levels and would not pose a risk to human health and safety. The FAA consulted with the California State Historic Preservation Officer, or SHPO, as required under Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act of 1966. Additionally, the FAA consulted with Native American tribal contacts about the proposed action. 18 buildings, all of which are located on airport property, were reviewed for eligibility for inclusion in the National Register of Historic Places, NRHP. 2 of these buildings, the Terminal Building and the Airline Cargo Building, are proposed for demolition as part of the proposed action, and both have been identified as not eligible for inclusion in the NRHP. Only 2 buildings, Hangars 1 and 2, were determined to be eligible for inclusion in the NRHP. However, they would not be physically or indirectly affected by the proposed undertaking. Therefore, the proposed undertaking would not affect these 2 eligible historic resources. Based on the analysis presented, the FAA determined no historic properties would be affected, and the SHPO concurred with that determination. The proposed action would not increase the number or alter the type or timing of aircraft used at the airport. As a result, the number of aircraft operations for the no-action alternative and the proposed action are the same. The number, type, and time of day of aircraft operations are the parameters used in developing the noise contours for the airport. No difference exists between the no-action alternative and the proposed action in terms of aircraft operations. Noise associated with construction and demolition is temporary in nature and does not affect the noise contours. As a result, the noise contours for both the no-action alternative and the proposed action are the same. The 2024 noise contours associated with aircraft operations are presented here. The 65 decibel contour would contain 1,040 acres, 1,067 residential properties, and 5 Section 4F properties. The 2029 noise contours associated with aircraft operations are presented here. Both the no-action and the proposed action 65 decibel contour would be larger than the 2024 contours because of the forecasted increase in aircraft operations that would occur whether a replacement passenger terminal is constructed or not. In 2029, the 65 decibel contour would contain 1,091 acres, 1,159 residential properties, and 5 Section 4F properties. Because the proposed action would not result in an increase in operational noise exposure on the surrounding community, it would not result in significant noise impacts. The draft EIS analyzed a total of 42 intersections in the general study area, 32 signalized intersections, and 10 unsignalized intersections. Additionally, 4 freeway mainline segments and 8 off-ramp queues were analyzed in the draft EIS. When compared to the no-action alternative, a change in traffic volumes at 2 intersections in the city of Burbank would occur as a result of the proposed action. The Hollywood Way-Winona Avenue intersection and the San Fernando Boulevard-Naomi Street and Winona Avenue intersection. These 2 intersections would experience a decrease in the level of service, from level of service B to level of service D, as a result of the proposed action. The draft EIS identified 28 other past, present, or reasonably foreseeable projects in the study area and analyzed whether the proposed action, when combined with impacts from other projects, could result in any significant impacts not previously disclosed. The draft EIS concluded that no significant cumulative impacts would occur. The FAA issued the Notice of Intent to prepare an EIS on December 18, 2018. The FAA held an agency scoping meeting on January 29, 2019, and invited agencies that either have jurisdiction by law or expertise about an environmental resource category and the potential environmental impacts associated with the proposed action. As previously mentioned, the FAA initiated Section 106 consultation with the California SHPO for the proposed action on February 21, 2019, and completed consultation on July 20, 2020. The FAA held a public scoping meeting on January 29, 2019, where members of the public could learn and ask questions about the proposed action and comment on what should be included in the scope of the study. The draft EIS was published in the Federal Register on August 21, 2020, and is available for review and comment through October 27, 2020. Today, September 23, 2020, the FAA is holding public workshops on the draft EIS where members of the public and agencies can learn about and ask questions about the material in the draft EIS. Tomorrow, September 24, 2020, the FAA will hold a public hearing for the draft EIS where members of the public can register to submit an oral comment on the draft EIS. The next steps in the EIS process are as follows. The draft EIS comment period closes on October 27, 2020. After that date, the FAA will collect, organize, and respond to all comments on the draft EIS. The FAA will prepare and publish the final EIS and issue the Record of Decision, or ROD. FAA anticipates issuing both in a joint EIS ROD document in late 2020 or early 2021. There are 3 ways in which you can provide a comment on the EIS. All comments must be received by 5:00 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time on October 27, 2020. The first is through the project website at www.bobhopeairporteis.com. The second is at the public hearing being held tomorrow, September 24, 2020, from 6:00 to 9:00 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. Please note that you must register on the website by 12 noon tomorrow to either attend the public hearing or provide an oral comment. The third way to submit a comment is through the U.S. mail. If you would like to mail in a comment on the draft EIS, please do so to Ms. Edwige Mbakup at the address on the screen. The address is also posted on the project website. Check the project website for updates during the EIS process. You can also sign up for email updates.
Okay, so now we are going to begin the question and answer part of this workshop. Remember, we have collected the questions submitted via the project website. Well, you will start with those questions. You may still text your questions to the phone number on the screen, which is 818-798-1944. We have received 28 questions through the website previously, so it will take us a little while to get to the text questions. So please be patient with us. I will now begin with the first question. Why can't the authority prohibit cargo operations? Why do we need a cargo facility? Patrick, will you please respond to that question?
Yeah, I can respond to that. So within the project scope where it says airline cargo building, that is actually for passenger airline aircraft belly cargo. It is not the cargo only operators like UPS or FedEx. They don't operate out of the current passenger terminal, and they won't operate out of the replacement passenger terminal.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Moving on to question number 2. Please detail how traffic and dirt control is addressed in the draft EIS. Michael, do you want to take that question?
Yep, I'll take it. Thank you. Traffic was addressed in the EIS in Appendix K, and it did look at both construction and operations. So they looked at the plans to use routes, and you can see the details of that in Appendix K. And there's also a section in 4.12 that deals with traffic and the impacts specifically. The study that they did included both current and future. They utilized some of the projects out there to look at the impacts under Burbank 2035 general plan. On dirt, they looked at both contaminated soils under hazardous waste, and they looked at the stormwater pollution prevention plan erosion under the water section. So they looked at, so there's a couple of places in chapter 4, 4.7 and 4.14 that you can look at for how we handle dirt. And then the combination of both dirt and traffic, the hauling of material, is also covered under hazardous waste and would be covered under a soil management plan, which the airport will have to do under the Regional Water Quality Control Board approval, which will tell them what routes they can take, as well as if they find contaminated soil, what they have to do to remediate it and dispose of it.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Question number 3. There was a task force that made recommendations regarding the flight paths. These recommendations would result in aircraft being at higher altitude so that residents on the ground would not hear the aircraft and would not be poisoned by toxic fuel, jet fuel. Why has the FAA dismissed those recommendations? Edvige, would you like to take that question?
Sure, I can take that. I just would like to say that this question references the flight paths and task force recommendations. Those task force recommendations are not a part of this project. Specifically, the terminal replacement project doesn't involve any changes to the airspace. It doesn't involve changes to the runway configuration or the number or the timing of aircraft operations at the airport. If you are interested to learn more about the FAA Air Traffic Organization is working on a separate project in which they're evaluating 2 proposed amendments to the SLAP 3 and ORALS 3 departure plans at the airport. This is being evaluated under an environmental assessment, and you can find out more about this project and get updates at their website. And we'll probably share it multiple times through the course of this workshop. But that website is on screen, www.faa.gov/air_traffic/community_involvement/BUR. So that's the place to get updates on the environmental assessment that's going to be looking at the proposed amendments to the departure flight plans at the airport.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Why was Measure B voted on before FAA illegally moved the flight paths over Studio City and Sherman Oaks? This measure would not have passed if the FAA and the Airport Authority had notified the affected communities about their plans to illegally move the flight paths out of Burbank. Is the FAA and the Hollywood Burbank Airport Authority ready for additional lawsuits headed their way unless the current illegal flight paths are corrected? Why don't you fix the flight path that the FAA admitted shifted south before you approve the new terminal design to increase operations over my neighborhood that never had a jet superhighway before? Why expand the airport when there is a big problem of the departure path? Advij, would you like to take that one as well?
Sure, I can take that one. So in regards to the part of the question about Measure B, Measure B was not a federal action, and therefore FAA had no control over this measure. I would like to also state again that this proposed action for this project will not impact the flight paths. It will not impact any of the airspace or the number or timing of aircraft operations at the airport. The Air Traffic Organization of FAA is working on an environmental assessment looking at the proposed amendments to the departure flight plans at the airport. And you can go to their website that was on screen earlier to get more information about the updates on that environmental assessment and how to get involved.
Okay, thank you, Advij. Okay, moving on to question number 5. How are projects selected for inclusion in the cumulative impact analysis? SLAP 3 and ORAS 3 are among the list of cumulative impacts in the draft EIR. Why is SoCal Metroplex and NextGen not included on the list of impacts? Again, both the EIR and Burbank's Measure B vote occurred before NextGen. NextGen has a devastating impact on the community, so why is it not included in the list of cumulative impacts? Other cumulative impacts that must be included are Amazon Distribution Center at Avion, which will open in 2020, and Burbank's Golden State District to be built on 600 acres just east of the airport. Why aren't those projects included in the cumulative impacts? Michael, would you like to address that question?
Sure, Brian. And actually, it's a really good question because it lists some projects that do fall in and some that don't. When we look at projects that are going to be reviewed cumulatively, we look at all past, present, and future projects. But the ones that we include are the ones that have a significant cause and effect relationship with the direct and indirect impacts of the project. So if there is no relationship, it's not pulled in. Looking at the SLAP 3 and ORAS 3 and the SoCal Metroplex projects, they're all related to the flight paths. Well, this project is not changing flight paths and is having a noise effect. So those projects fall out of the cumulative impact analysis. The other projects that were mentioned, the Burbank's Golden State District and the Amazon project, which is at the Avion Business Complex, are actually included in our cumulative impacts. If you go to the traffic study in Appendix K that I mentioned before, it actually has coordinated with Burbank engineers, city engineers, and the Burbank 2035 general plan. That already incorporates the Golden State District in its estimate of future growth and impacts, as well as the Avion project. But we specifically included Avion and a second project nearby, the Aloft Hotel, because that increase in traffic right next to the airport entrance is having a significant, well, not a significant, but has a cause and effect relationship with the project. So the Amazon or the Avion business project, we included 9,000 vehicles in the traffic study just for that project, and did the study of how that would work with our project and how that has impacts. So those projects were included because of the direct cause and effect.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Question number 6. With a projected 15% increase per year in air traffic, how does this not result in a significant noise impact? Why is the FAA projecting future growth of only 1 and 2% annually when each of the last 3 years annual growth has been between 13 and 14%? This results in vast underestimating of every impact, including air quality, noise, and traffic. Jaime, would you like to address that question?
Sure, Brian. Well, let me first state that it's hard for me to comment on the projected 15% per year in air traffic. I don't know what baseline they used and what methodologies they used to come up with those numbers. I will say though that this is a standards project. There will be no runway configuration, no aircraft fleet mix changes, nothing along those lines. Capacity projects are runway extensions, runway widening. Those are projects that would increase airport operation. This is a 14-gate terminal that we're basically moving from one side of the airport to the other. So there really wouldn't be a significant net increase to enplanements and operations.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Moving on to question number 7. How much will the proposed replacement passenger terminal cost? With COVID-19, is spending the money necessary? How will the new terminal be funded? Will Burbank taxpayers be asked to pay? Patrick, that sounds like a question for you.
Sure. So it's kind of a three-parter there. In terms of how much the replacement terminal would cost, our cost models are still ongoing, so I can't really give you a dollar figure in that regard. The second portion was with COVID-19, is it still necessary? As Jaime just explained, really the purpose of the project is that it's a safety and standards type project. It's not an expansion that was due to increasing passenger or operations numbers. So the reason to move the terminal still exists as it always has. It's not changed by the pandemic. Funding for this, our financial plan is also still being determined. However, I will state categorically, the city of Burbank residents will not be required to pay additional taxes for the project.
Okay, very good. Thank you. All right, moving on to question number 8. What are you doing to eliminate jet noise and pollution over neighborhoods and change of procedures to return to quiet, less polluted days? Jet pollution impacts health. This is purposely being targeted to residential and wildlife corridors, impacting health and environmental for profit. What are you doing to reroute and steep ascents with noise mitigation? Edvige, would you like to address that question?
Yes, I can address that one. So in regards to the question, it mentions jet noise and pollution. And I wanted to talk a little bit more about this proposed action. This proposed action wouldn't result in any change to aircraft fleet mix or the number or timing of operations or any of the flight plans and airspace procedures. So therefore, there's not going to be a change to the amount of noise experienced from aircraft as a result of this project. If they're interested in learning more about the projects that will be addressing and changing potentially the proposed amendments to this, the 2 flight plan departure procedures at Burbank Airport, once again, you guys can visit the Air Traffic Organization of FAA's website to find out more about their project, the environmental assessment that they're doing to analyze that project, and to get updates and to get involved with it.
Okay. All right. Thank you. We'll move on to question number 9. What is the increase in flight number? The actual number now and the number of flight you will not exceed in the future. Edwige, would you like to address that one also?
Brian, I actually have the numbers here, so I think I
Okay.
can take that one.
Great. Thank you.
Now, as we mentioned, the project doesn't include an increase in flights number, if that's what the first part of that is alluding to. However, the actual numbers now, just to let everybody have it since it was asked for, in 2019, so for the calendar year of 2019, we had 146,095 total operations. Of those, 65,058 were air carrier operations, 22,734 were air taxi operations, 57,750 were general aviation operations, and we had 553 military operations. The airport does not have a cap on operations now, and that would be the same as in the future.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Did someone want to say something else? Okay. Just a specific note, we are on question 10. We know that questions are being texted to us now. Just a reminder, we're going to go through those questions. There's 28 total that were submitted through the website before this meeting. We'll go through all 28 of those, and then we will address those questions that are coming in live via text. So again, be patient with us. So moving on to question number 10. The existing aircraft noise pollution affects my sleep, my work, and my quality of life. How is this not an impact of the replacement passenger terminal? How can this increase be labeled as no significant effect? Please show us how you claim to reach this finding that more jets will have no impact. Michael, would you like to take that question?
Sorry about that. Yeah, I'll take the question. We understand that people were concerned about noise during the scoping meeting, and we were determined to look at that closely. Part of the question states how we reached this finding of no impact with finding that more jets were coming. We did not find that more jets were coming. I want to be clear that, as Jaime had said, this is equivalent to moving the terminal from one area to the next. We're not expecting any increase in operations due to the new terminal itself. But when we looked at noise, we looked at both construction and operations. In construction, we determined that there was no significant impact because of the amount of equipment we were using, the timing that it was used during the day, the number of equipment, and the distance to the sensitive noise receptor. There was not a significant threshold that was met. For operations, we looked at we were having the same number of flights, same type of equipment, the same type of planes being used. They were going down the same runways in the same proportions. So there is no change in the flight patterns or the noise contours. Therefore, there is no change and no effect of this project on noise contours. And that's why we came up with that conclusion.
Okay, all right, thank you very much. Moving on to question number 11. Why is the replacement passenger terminal needed? Given COVID-19, this project is simply not needed. Given COVID-19, the EIS should modify the forecast for the future. Will that occur? Why are you trying to rush this new terminal through now during a global pandemic when people are suffering, losing loved ones, trying to stay healthy and keep their jobs? Can you put this on hold until COVID-19 crisis is resolved? Patrick, would you like to address that one?
Sure. So as we've discussed, the purpose of the project is that it's a safety project where we're replacing the existing terminal in a different portion of the airport to meet current airport design standards. That is not, I feel like there is an assumption in the question that the reason for the project is due to a forecast passenger or operations level, and that's simply not the case. So really the COVID-19 pandemic and the effects it's had on our airport and on the aviation industry really has no effect on the purpose and need of the project. So that all remains the same. The forecasts that were used in this document as the preparation began in December 2018 includes aviation activity that is based on the best available data and valid assumptions.
Okay. All right, thank you. Question number 12. The city of LA asked for a 75-day extension to the comment period. Are you willing to grant such an extension in order to give the city of LA a chance to thoroughly review your nearly 3,000-page draft environmental impact study? Why are you providing the minimum 45-day period to comment on a draft EIS that is 3,000 pages long? Edwige, would you like to address that?
Yes, I can address that. So in response to requests to extend the comment period, the FAA decided to extend the public comment period for the draft EIS for an additional 22 days. Originally, the comment period would have ended on October 5th, and now it's been extended out until October 27th, 2020. Now this was resulting in a 67-day comment period. So with that said, we hope this allows for a thoughtful review, and I look forward to receiving your comments and working through them and trying to address them in the final EIS.
Okay, all right, thank you. Question number 13. Are all safety issues being fixed? Manson, would you like to take that question?
Yes, thank you, Brian. That's a good question. Currently, the existing terminal building is situated at a location which is not meeting the FAA airport design standards, and especially associated with runway separation distance and also with object-free area. And those areas are specifically important for clearance of all the aircraft around that area, moving around that terminal area. At the same time, the current existing terminal building also is not built behind the building restriction lines that required to clear the building from other activities. So the preferred alternative that having the proposed passenger terminal building actually located on the northeast quadrant of the airport will actually allow the authority to meet all the airport design standards and also to meet the safety criteria that we set forth for them. And in addition, the preferred location also will minimize a lot of the runway crossing at the airport compared to other alternatives. So yes, this project will, resolve all the safety issue that at the airport, which is related to the buildings.
Okay. All right, thank you. Moving on to question 14. Please explain why each of the alternatives were eliminated from further study in the draft EIS. Which alternatives were studied and why? Edwige, would you like to take that one?
Sure. Good question. So I'll try to summarize this. As mentioned in the videos, FAA established a two-step screening process for alternatives that were considered for the draft EIS. In step one, we looked at 10 alternatives, and the purpose of step one was to see if the alternative would achieve the purpose and need, which is meeting the FAA safety standards, addressing passenger demand, current building requirements, and improving the utilization and operational efficiency of the passenger terminal building. Step two criteria was looking at whether the alternative is consistent with all the specifics within Measure B. So in summarizing that, we started off with 10 alternatives. In step one, 5 alternatives were eliminated. Three of those alternatives were eliminated because they did not address the fact that the existing terminal building would still remain. Those were alternatives like transfer of aviation activity to other airports, use of other modes of transportation, and airfield reconfiguration. They don't address the fact that the existing terminal building would still not meet the standard. The other two that were eliminated at step one were the alternative for the southeast quadrant location and the alternative for the northwest quadrant location. Those alternatives were eliminated because they would result in additional runway crossings, which is counterproductive to the safety measures that we're trying to improve at the airport. So moving on to step two, 5 alternatives moves on to step 2 of the screening process. 2 of those alternatives were ultimately moved forward in the EIS. The 3 that were eliminated, the first was a construction of a new airport, and that was eliminated because Measure B did not allow a provision for the authority to build a new airport. The other alternative, construction of a remote landside facility, that was eliminated because it increased passenger travel time, and it was also not provided for in Measure B. It did not give the authority to construct a remote facility. And the other alternative that was eliminated was the southeast quadrant, which would be building a replacement passenger terminal in the same quadrant where the existing passenger terminal building is located. This was eliminated because it was impractical and infeasible, one, because of space considerations, and also the feasibility of constructing a new replacement passenger terminal building in such a close proximity to the existing building, which would still be running. And so the alternatives that moved forward were the northeast quadrant alternative, which is the proposed action in the EIS, and the no action alternative. Even though the no action alternative does not meet either of the criteria, it's a requirement of NEPA to always consider a no action alternative so that we can assess what the future impacts would be, whether or not the proposed action or alternatives were approved.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Edwige. Moving on to question number 15. Why is the new terminal 68% larger than the existing terminal? Patrick, would you like to take that question?
Sure. Just by my math, if we're talking about the square footage of the actual passenger terminal building itself, it's not 68%, it's 53%, going from 232,000 square feet to 355,000 square feet as far as what we're allowed to do in our development agreement with the city of Burbank. And that is, again, what was agreed to in the development agreement with the city of Burbank as far as a maximum size for that portion of the project. The existing passenger terminal, as we mentioned in this draft document, is obsolete as far as contemporary terminal building design and efficient utilization standards. I will state from myself that the current terminal is severely undersized for 14 gates of Design Group 3 aircraft, which is what we have today and what we're proposing in the future. And when I say severely undersized, I'm talking about inside the terminal are things we need to do, like the security screening, seating, compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act, concession space that's adequate to handle the service level for the type of aircraft and the number of gates that we have today. So that's why you see an increase in the square footage.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Patrick. Okay. Question number 16. Did you study the alternative of a same size replacement terminal in the draft EIS? The 2016 Environmental Impact Report prepared under the CEQA, or the California Environmental Quality Act, included an alternative that was the same size as the existing terminal, 232,000 square feet. Shouldn't the draft EIS also study the same size terminal? Edwige, would you care to take that one?
Sure, I can take that question. So I think this stems a lot from several of the reasons that Patrick just provided, that the existing building doesn't meet the contemporary and modern standards at the size that it is. And a same size building wouldn't necessarily meet the purpose and need for some of the reasons that Patrick just provided to us. Also, I do want to distinguish that NEPA and CEQA standards are different. NEPA is a federal environmental policy law, and CEQA is a California state law. So they use different methodologies, which also can result in different findings in their analysis. And that's some of the reasons why an EIS would be different than an EIR. And with that being said, we do encourage the public to, submit any viable alternatives that you think exist that we didn't do any discussion on or enough analysis about. Definitely submit that during this public comment period, and that's something that we will consider and review as we work on the final EIS.
Okay, very good. Okay, question number 17. Will Amazon operations be flying out of Burbank Airport? Since your Los Angeles neighbors to the south are saturated with jets, will Amazon jets that use Burbank runways depart east over Burbank? Advij, would you like to address that one as well?
Sure. And I feel free for anyone to jump in and add more additional details. But currently, there are no Amazon operations at Burbank, but that could potentially change. The FAA federal grant assurances do not allow for the sponsor to unjustly discriminate from one operator to the next at the airport. Also, I would like to distinguish that the cargo building that is included in the proposed action, like Patrick said earlier, that is an airline cargo building that's replacing the existing airline cargo building, not for the air cargo operators that you listed in this particular question.
Yeah, the only other thing that I might add to this is be aware that there is an operating restriction in terms of departures to the east as a result of the rising terrains of the mountain range that is east of the airport. So that does limit large aircraft departures to the east. So that is a factor as well. Okay, moving on. Question number 18. Why do the study areas in the draft EIS not include Studio City, Sherman Oaks, the Hollywood Hills, Encino, the protected Santa Monica Mountains, and other neighborhoods that are affected by noise and aircraft overflights? I don't see my neighborhood in the study area, but I see all of the Burbank Airport jets for 16 plus hours a day. Why aren't you studying massive impacts on my neighborhood in LA south of the airport? Advij, would you also like to take that question?
Sure. I think I'm going to try to answer that question by kind of giving some background on how we determine the study areas for the draft EIS. So there are two study areas that we look at. We look at a detailed study area and a general study area. The detailed study area covers about 555 acres and covers lands that are in both the city of Burbank and the city of Los Angeles. This detailed study area is looking at the direct on the ground impacts that are happening from the construction of the proposed action and any other alternatives. The other study area that we are looking at is the general study area. And this general study area is a much wider area, covers about 4,900 acres. And the purpose of that is to look at the indirect effects, things that don't stay within the boundary of the airport. So that's things like noise, air quality, socioeconomics, those type of potential impacts. So the general study area for this project, the boundary was mostly based off of the 65 decibel CNEL noise contour at the airport. And that CNEL is the community noise equivalent level, which is the FAA approved noise metric to use in California. So it's based off of that 65 decibel CNEL noise contour, but with some modifications and adjustments for the major roadways in the area.
Okay, thank you, Advij. Okay, question number 19. Why are federal grants provided to Burbank Airport when the airport currently does not meet federal FAA safety standards? I'm going to take part of that question. I want to make it very clear that the FAA considers Burbank to be a safe airport. There are a number of operating procedures that are in place to ensure that level of safety. But we provide funding to airports to support safety projects throughout the country. And the goal is continuous improvement and continued improvement in the system. As you may know, the FAA standards evolve over time. When this airport was first constructed, it met all of the current design standards at that time. But the standards have evolved over time, and the FAA invests federal funds in airports in part to improve safety and as an effort to meet the new standards as best as possible. So, that's the basic core, again, purpose and need of this project is to continue to improve safety and make it the safest place as possible. I don't know, Manson, if you want to add anything more to that response.
No, Brian, well said. And I have the same idea, basically saying that, our mission is, as a FAA, have to continue to provide financial support and funding support to all this safety project and make sure that all the airports going to meet the current airport design standards.
Okay, fantastic.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move on to question number 20. Again, we wanted to put up the number for you to text your questions in. We've already received a number of questions by text. We will again be getting to those questions as soon as we are done with the questions that were previously sent in to us. We have 8 more of those to go, and then we'll move on to those text questions. So again, the number is 818-798-1944 for those who want to text in questions. So moving on to question number 20. Why does the forecast passenger demand in the draft EIS differ from that described in the EIR? If the draft EIS is the correct forecast, then shouldn't the EIR be corrected and recirculated? I don't know, Patrick or Michael, do you want to address that question?
Yeah, I'll start off. I'll let Michael explain the difference in the forecasts. But as far as the CEQA EIR, that was completed in 2016, and the authority considers that to be a valid document.
And getting to the requirements or why aren't they matching? As the Veach had explained, CEQA is not equal to NEPA. They have different requirements. The NEPA document, the EIS, began after in 2018, and we used a different forecast. We used the current forecast that we had, the TAF, as Jaime had explained why we had used that forecast. So they are different documents. Both are valid in their own standing, and there is not a requirement, a federal requirement, that we match the state.
Okay, all right, thank you. Moving on to question 21. Are the 14 gates in the new terminal being designed to accept aircraft that seat as many as 230 passengers? If not 230 passengers, then how many? Did the city of Burbank agree to the new terminal, that the new terminal should be designed to accommodate jets that seat more than 180 people? Patrick, would you like to address that question?
Sure. The first thing to point out is we're really not designing anything as of yet. That being said, the development agreement with the city of Burbank outlines certain parameters, like the number of gates being the same and the square footage limitation and certain other things. It does not specify out how many seats are allowed on the aircraft. There are in a given aircraft make and model, there are many different seating configurations, and we don't design out for any specific one because we need some flexibility within the design group of aircraft. And those seating configurations can change, and we can't always predict what they'll be. But make sure I'm answering it correctly. That was the number of passengers per aircraft is not something that was really the focus of that development agreement.
Okay. All right, Patrick. Thank you. We'll move on to question 22. Why doesn't the draft EIS address the change in home and property values that are occurring as a result of the change in noise from aircraft operations. I am a film composer and have lived here for over 10 years. I cannot record even with the soundproof doors. My livelihood depends on quiet skies. I have noticed more and more flights in the morning while walking my dog. The property value has dropped in our neighborhood because of the plane, which creates sound and air pollution. Edwige, would you care to take that question?
Yes, I can take that question. So I'd like to point out that in regards to the part of the question asking about home and property values, currently NEPA and the FAA have no resource category that directly calls out home and property values. But we do have a discussion and analysis on potential socioeconomic impacts that could result from the proposed action and the alternatives in this project. And that's located in Chapter 4, Section 4.12. There's some discussion about socioeconomics there as far as impacts to economic activity and things like that. So I encourage you to check out Section 4.12 in the EIS. And I do also want to point out for the latter half of the question, this project will have no impact on the number of flights at the airport.
Okay. All right, thank you. Question number 23. This is a long one, so bear with me for a moment. I propose that all or most flights take off north on runway 33 or west on runway 26. My father was a chief pilot for Alitalia, and I am an aviation historian. Technically and operationally, it is totally feasible for aircraft to departure north on 33 and possibly west on 26. 33's runway slope is 1.2%, is way below the 2% max slope allowance for takeoffs. 90% of all flights are heading north anyway, maximizing fuel efficiency. As long as headwinds are not over 10 knots, modern aircraft can easily take off north on 33. The runway length is 6,880 feet. They actually already do on windy days above 10 knots. There are no major obstacles north of the runway 33, and it's a safer route in case of a catastrophic event, loss of an engine, etc. Aircraft in distress can be allowed an exception and head west on runway 8, a much shorter distance than the 33 south to 8 east. 5 freeway offers a natural noise corridor. Currently, departures south on 33 are a danger to passengers since the terminal is less than 200 feet away from the runway. This solution makes sense from an environmental and economic standpoint. Please take it under serious consideration. Thank you. So we very much appreciate this. And, I do suggest if anybody has any recommendations on alternatives and everything else, please provide that as a comment to the draft EIS, and that will be addressed in the responses to comments. So I do suggest that. But Edwige, would you like to go beyond that and talk about anything else?
Sure. Yeah, definitely a very thoughtful comment. And I just wanted to emphasize again about the proposed action for this project. So the proposed amendments to the flight plans at Burbank are, and the departure procedures is a separate project. This project is being evaluated by the Office of Airports, and the air traffic organization will be managing the environmental assessment that's going to be analyzing those proposed amendments to departure flight plans at Burbank. So the website is on the screen, and you can definitely go to that website to get any updates on that EA and to get involved. Also, I would like to mention Yes, I'd like to mention that, okay. Yes, sorry.
So, okay.
Yes, so I was just wrapping up to say that we look forward to your comment. We encourage comments on the EIS, and any viable alternatives will be considered as we work on the final EIS. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. Moving on to question 24. Why does the FAA feel this is safe? A plane crashed near the Van Nuys Airport last week and could have caught the neighborhood on fire. We are surrounded by mountains. I'm not quite sure the reference to this question. In terms of safety, as we've talked significantly about today, the purpose and need of the project is to improve safety at the airport. That's the primary objective. And as far as flight paths beyond that, if that's what this question is referenced to, again, and we very clearly have said that's kind of not within the scope of this project, because the flight paths are not being proposed to be changed as part of this project. So again, that is the purpose and need, so, relative to the operation of the terminal. So with that, unless anybody has anything to add to that, I'm going to go ahead and move on to question 25. Okay. Why do you think the community will accept any plan to build a new terminal that, even with the same number of gates, will allow much higher traffic and much higher takeoff and landing traffic, when you haven't yet fixed the concentrated flight paths that resulted in a 120,000% increase in noise complaints? We will never allow this terminal to be built until the flight paths are addressed. Adveech, would you like to take that question?
Sure, I can take that question. So in regards, the part of the question that talks about the terminal building would allow much higher takeoff and landing traffic, I just wanted to clarify again that this project, the proposed action and the alternatives of this project, are not proposing any changes to the aircraft fleet mix, the number of flights, or the timing of flights and operation at the airport. So I wanted to clarify that. And then once again, if you're interested in learning about the proposed amendments to the flight departure plans at the airport and getting involved with that process, the air traffic organization is evaluating the potential environmental impacts of that project in a separate environmental assessment. I think we've shown the address on the screen, and we'll probably show it a few more times this evening, but definitely check out ATO's website to get any updates on that environmental assessment.
Okay. All right. Very good. Moving on to question number 26. What is the need for expansion, since you cannot control the route of planes from going south of Ventura South or south of Valley Vista on a regular basis, since switching over to computer takeoff system to the point you cannot even have a conversation at times in your own backyard? Don't you think you need to address the community's complaints first? Michael, would you like to take that question?
Sure, Brian. And I'll separate this into two different parts. The expansion, I am taking that as the expansion in size of the terminal building. And Patrick addressed this already in stating how undersized the current terminal building is for the existing 14 gates. The expansion or the enlargement of the terminal building is not going to add gates. It's not going to increase the number of operations as a result of it. So it will not have impacts on the flight pattern or the flights number, type of planes coming, and where they're flying to. That's already preset, as Avij has been mentioning. The second part of the comment, though, is don't you think you need to address the community's complaints first? And I am taking this as my understanding that they're referring to the flight paths and the noise from the flight paths. And that is under ATO, Air Traffic Organization, as Avich has also mentioned. They're a different section of FAA, and airports is handling this project because it is occurring on an airport. We don't time their project. And since they are independent projects, we're moving at our pace, trying to get through our project. And they are moving at their pace, trying to get through their project. So they're independent, and our ability to get through one does not affect the other.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Moving on to question number 27. I live directly under the new flight path over Studio City. It is simply unacceptable that these dramatic changes have been made for pure profit with no real concern for the safety and quality of life of those below. What are your plans to mitigate the extreme noise pollution that has resulted from this superhighway, and how will you work to reduce this issue with the terminal expansion? Avich, would you like to address that question?
Yes, I'll take that question. So I just wanted to take that opportunity again. So thank you for that question. It does mention the flight paths in that question. And once again, this project is not going to have any impact to airspace procedures, existing flight paths at the airport, or any of those types of impacts. So once again, I would invite you to take a look at and well, at least go to the website and get updates and get involved in the Air Traffic Organization's project that's analyzing the flight departure plans, that the proposed amendments to those plans might be more appropriate for any discussion of flight plans at Burbank. And I would also go on to say that this project is not anticipated to have any additional impacts on noise pollution. There's going to be no impact to the number of flights or the timing of flights or anything at the airport, which would cause an additional impact to noise as a result of this project or any of the proposed alternatives.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Avich. Okay, we're about to go to our final question from the previously sent in comments or questions. So again, we want to put the number up for you to have to text your questions to us. We already have at least 14 in the queue that are waiting from our received through the text process. So just wanted to remind you of this number. Okay, question number 28. With regard to the new terminal, I would like to know how these changes will affect the number of planes that would fly over homes who are under the FAA's condensed next-gen superhighway over the new communities of Sherman Oaks, Studio City, Toluca Lake, and Encino, and protected open space in the Santa Monica Mountains. Avich, would you like to address that question?
Sure. And similar to my response to the last question, this project, the proposed action, and the alternatives that we look at in this project would not have any impact on the number of planes that would fly over homes. It's not going to have any impact on the number of timing of operations at the airport.
Okay. All right. Very good. Thank you. All right. We have gone through all of the questions that were previously submitted to us. And as I mentioned, we have a number in the queue that have come to us tonight through the text number. So I'll begin with those. The first question coming to us by text is, why don't you fix the flight path that FAA admitted shifted south before you approve a new terminal design to increase operations over my neighborhood that had never had jet superhighway before? Avich, this was very similar to the question you just answered and one earlier as well. So you want to take this?
Sure. So yes, similar to my previous answer and something that Michael pointed out and distinguished, the project that's going to be dealing with the flight plans and departure plans at Burbank Airport is a separate project that's being evaluated by the Air Traffic Organization, which is a different division of FAA, whereas this project is being evaluated within the Office of Airports. So the air traffic organization has that jurisdiction over airspace, and that's why they would be the appropriate agency to look at that project. And they are currently undergoing an environmental assessment, looking at the potential impacts of any changes to those flight plans at Burbank.
Okay, very good. Thank you. All right, moving on to the next question. Why do you send the public to a website on the Burbank paths, presuming flight paths, that has not been updated all year? Avoiding the issue or the true issue? Question mark.
I can.
Oh, go ahead, Nidveej.
Sure, I can speak to that since it's quite similar. Once again, within the FAA, there are multiple lines of business and divisions. This project, the draft EIS for the replacement passenger terminal project, is being evaluated by the Office of Airports, whereas the proposal to change the flight plans at Burbank Airport is being evaluated by the Air Traffic Organization in an environmental assessment. We don't have control over their environmental process, so we have to let their project take its course, but we don't have any control over that project.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Okay, moving on to the next question. Again, I think this question was answered earlier, but we'll read it again. The 2016 Environmental Impact Report, prepared per the CEQA requirements, California Environmental Quality Act, included an alternative that was the same size as the existing terminal, 232,000 square feet. Shouldn't the draft EIS also study the same size terminal? Nidveej, that's probably one for you as well.
Sure. Like we mentioned earlier, and Patrick gave some very good examples of the things that need to be improved with the current airport to meet modern standards and building codes, as well as meet the FAA design standards. So the existing building was not built to the modern standards. It was built to the standards at the time. So that is the purpose for this project and the purpose of need trying to be addressed in this project. And the reason why we're not looking at a same size terminal. Once again, I also want to state that NEPA and CEQA are quite different. The NEPA is a federal environmental law, whereas CEQA is a state of California law in the process that has to be undergone. So I do want to stipulate that they're different because they use a different methodology, and it results in different findings in their analysis based off of the methodology that they use. And that could account for the reasons why an EIR is different from an EIS in some respects. So, and with that being said, we do want to encourage the public, though, to review our EIS, to look at the alternatives. And if you have a viable alternative, please submit that to us in a public comment. We're willing to look at all, substantive comments, and we're working through them and in order to respond to them in the final EIS.
Okay. All right. Thank you. The next one's more of a statement than it is a comment, sharing that Zach Appleton, EPA Region 9, is participating in tonight's workshop and will prepare a comment letter on for the draft EIS by the new October 27th deadline. So I guess that's a message to you, Nidveej, that Mr.
Awesome.
Appleton is here with us.
Well, thank you for participating tonight, Mr. Appleton, and we're definitely looking forward to receiving your comments. Thank you.
All right, next question. Why do you think the public will allow the airport's capacity to be expanded when there has been a 128,000% increase in noise complaints in the last few years due to next-gen changing and narrowing flight paths? Again, this I think is similar to a previously answered question, but Nidveej, would you like to take that one?
Yeah, sure. I'll take that question. So in regards to the part of the question talking about increases in noise complaints and the narrowing of flight paths, I do want to reiterate that this proposed action is not proposing any changes to airspace procedures, flight paths that are existing at the airport. And also, because the proposed action and alternatives are not proposing any changes to those aspects of the flights or flight paths, there is no increase in noise that's expected to result from the proposed action and the no action alternative in the DEIS.
Okay, all right, thank you. Next question. Will changes affect other passenger terminals due to updates, air quality, and National Environmental Policy Act? Not sure what other passenger terminals are being referenced here, but Patrick, would you like to take a
Sure.
try at that one?
If we're referring to other passenger terminals as in at other airports, then that would be no. If the reference is to the existing passenger terminal, then I should note for everybody the way we're contemplating the project and the way it's required in the development agreement with the city of Burbank is that we actually demolish the existing terminal once the replacement terminal is open. So at no time do you have them both operating. So I think I'm not entirely sure if I'm answering that, although so I hope one of those answers the question.
Right. And in regards to speak to the part of the question that asks about air quality, National Environmental Policy Act. So this EIS that is intended to discuss and analyze any impacts that will result from the proposed action, whether that be the construction components and the demolition components, as well as the future environmental impacts for our study years in the DEIS.
And Patrick, correct me if I'm wrong, but you are required by statute to take down the old terminal within, I think, a year or a year and a half of opening the new terminal. Correct?
That's correct. It's 12 months.
12 months.
Okay, thank you. Next question. Who was selected to vote for the needs? Was the selection closed to the public? Edwige, that's probably a question for you or Michael.
Yeah, I can take this one, Brian. And I assume they're talking to the purpose and need of the project. And that is based on the need as proposed by the sponsor, as well as the need of FAA. So sometimes there's a FAA component of need, and sometimes it's the sponsor component of need. We talked with the agencies and about purpose and need, and we also put it in for the scoping meeting. We proposed what the purpose and need was. So it was drafted before we entered into the NOI, which announced this project, based on conversations that we had and understanding the current status of the airport.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Okay, moving on to the next question. Because of removal, how long will operations be out? I suspect that may be removal of the existing terminal, but not sure. Because of removal, how long will operations be out? Patrick, do you want to?
Sure. Yeah, and I read it the same way too. So fortunately, the way the project's being contemplated, because it's in a different quadrant of the airport, the construction of the replacement terminal can occur without impacting operations of the existing airport terminal or passenger terminal. And then once the replacement passenger terminal opens, literally overnight, we can switch from one to the other without interrupting any of the operations.
Okay, very good. Okay, moving on to the next question. Are there any issues with asbestos in the old terminal or other buildings to be demolished? Patrick, would that be one for you?
And again, one of the fortunate things about once the replacement terminal is open and operating and all of the operations have been moved there, we would now have the existing passenger terminal with nothing going on, no passengers, no public access to it. And so any asbestos, lead paint, or any other sort of hazardous material can be carefully addressed by the demolition contractor, and we have a nice separation from any public areas.
And I'd like to add to that there's discussion about some of the mitigation and safety measures that Patrick is discussing about the removal of the asbestos in the hazardous waste section in Chapter 4, Environmental Consequences of the Draft EIS.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Moving on to the next question. Since Burbank voted this terminal in and those affected most by it had no say, if it goes through, how soon will you be able to have planes take off to the north over the area that voted the development in? And exactly what is the percentage increase of flights you plan to instigate?
I can take that one. So in regards to the part of the question about how soon will planes take off to the north, so given that, what we've explained earlier, that FAA has several lines of business and divisions within the FAA, we are representing the project that's being analyzed by the Office of Airports today, and we don't have any jurisdiction over airspace and flight plans. So we wouldn't be able to speak to that. But yeah, so we wouldn't be able to speak to that. And I also want to mention that this project is not going to have any impact on the number or timing of flights and operations at the airport.
Okay.
One other thing I'd like to note is that the majority of the areas north of the airport are the city of Los Angeles.
Oh, okay. Okay, moving on to the next question. What impacts did you find regarding changes in local traffic patterns and traffic densities at rush hour, etc.? Michael, that's probably a question for you.
Right. In the presentation that you saw this in the beginning of this workshop, it went through the traffic and where there was an increase or a decrease in service level. And it mentioned the Winona intersections at North Hollywood and San Fernando Boulevard, I believe. And those are on the two ends of Winona. And that's because they're relocating the entrance to the airport north on Hollywood Way. You can look at the Appendix K, which has the traffic study in it. And what they looked at, and to refresh what they presented here, was the 42 intersections, 32 of them were signalized and 10 not. And then segments of the highway, the 4 segments, and the off-ramps, the 8 off-ramps. So you can go into the study and see how times have changed at each of the intersections, and even looking at each of the lanes in the intersection. That's how detailed it is. But the only 2 intersections that went down from B service level to D, which is still acceptable, were those two intersections at the end of Winona Avenue. Did we find anything else? That's pretty much it.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay. Next question. I live 5 miles from the airport in the foothills, yet I regularly measure noise from planes above my house in the low 80 decibel range. How do you reconcile showing the 65 decibel affected threshold as only being within 1 mile of the airport? Advij, that's probably a question for you.
Sure. So I wanted to speak to that question to say that the noise metrics and the noise modeling that we do to establish the noise contours around the airport is based off of an average measurement. It's not based off of single event noise metrics. It's an average. The community noise equivalent level is an average of noise events that are experienced over a 24-hour period, with additional weight given to aircraft noise that's experienced during noise sensitive times of the day. Those are weighted more heavily in the average. So when you're talking about a 65 decibel noise contour, it doesn't mean that a single noise event could not be 80 or could not be more than 65 decibel. What it means is that the average, even considering the extra weighted consideration for the noise sensitive times, is the 65 decibel, and they've established a contour that experienced that average noise events.
Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on to the next question. Are environmental compliance changes occurring due to COVID-19? Who would like to take that? Michael, perhaps?
I'll take it. I'm trying to digest it. And if I don't get it, what you're intending, please submit a comment and we'll address it in the final EIS. We are not changing how we proceed through NEPA in regards to what is required to meet compliance with air quality or wetlands or any of that. Are we, as opposed to this project and other projects, when we're requiring them to do certain things at a certain time, that may change depending on COVID-19, whether they can get out there safely or not. So I don't know if they're talking about that or how we go through this NEPA. And so we're still going through NEPA in the normal way in that respect. But I don't know, also they could be talking about changes, not environmental, but operational requirements. I don't know. And that may be, Jaime, you might be able to respond to that.
So to summarize, none of our policy and process has changed as a result of COVID-19. There hasn't been a change in the Council on Environmental Quality Regulations. There hasn't been a change in the
There's been a change in council
or anything of that nature.
There has been a change in CEQ, but that has nothing to do with COVID. So the new CEQ guidelines came out in September 14th. But the changes that we have that we're instituting is something like this regarding the virtual meeting. We're still complying with the requirement of a public workshop or a public hearing, which is tomorrow, but it has not changed how we evaluate the project.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Okay, moving on. Will more planes be able to fly in and out of Burbank Airport in the same amount of time, even though the new terminal has the same number of gates as the existing terminal? That may be a question for you, Jaime, or for Patrick.
Sure, I can take a shot at it. So, well, yeah, certainly more flights can go into the new terminal, as more flights can go into the existing terminal right now. Increase and decreases of again of aircraft operation are market demand. If the load factors are low, you won't see very many flights. If the load factors are high, you will see certainly more aircrafts or more commercial flights going into the airport.
Okay. All right. Let's move on to the next question. The FAA lied to us and snuck a superhighway over our neighborhoods. Why should we believe anything you say? We are working to make this process as transparent and as direct as we can. We're following the NEPA requirements. We've published the document. We've done the scoping meetings, and we are doing these public meetings to get input. We are doing the hearing tomorrow to get public input. We have a lot of opportunities for public input beyond today's events. So we are going to conclude this process in as transparent a fashion as possible. So I don't know that we can answer any more clear than that, or I don't know if anybody else wants to add anything else to this. Okay. We'll go ahead and move on to the next question. Patrick stated that no cap on flights exists at Burbank. Are you willing to institute such a cap? I don't know who, if Patrick or Michael, you want to take this question. Certainly we have issues of the Airport Noise and Capacity Act and Part 161 that go into the answer to this question, but if you want to take that.
Yeah, I can take it first, and then if Patrick wants to add on, he can give the airport's perspective. Anytime you're instituting a restriction on an airport, you're going to have to go through Part 161, which was instituted under the Airport Noise Capacity Act of 1990. So prior to that, an airport could state, after some procedures, what they could limit aircraft, GA, cargo, nighttime operations, they could set those. But after that, they have to go through the Part 161 process, which is 6 federal requirements that FAA would need to review. One is that there's no, that any restriction is reasonable, non-arbitrary, and non-discriminatory, that there is no adverse impact to interstate or foreign commerce, that safety aviation is maintained, there is not an undue burden on aviation, it complies with federal statutes, and it goes through a public process. Now, I believe that already Burbank has gone through a 161 process, which Patrick can talk about in more detail. And that is a separate request. And I would point out that a cap on flights does not address the purpose and need of this project. So Patrick, do you have anything else you want to?
Sure, and as Michael said, it's not really germane to this conversation or the purpose and need of the project, but just to give everybody a little brief history on the Hollywood Burbank Airport and the Part 161 process. The airport authority spent 9 years and $7 million putting together an application under a Part 161 study that was actually the first application that the FAA considered to be complete in the nation. So we certainly have our motivations, to do that. And that application, was for a mandatory nighttime curfew. The FAA found that only 2 of the 6 statutory conditions were met, and so it was not allowed to be implemented.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much for that. Moving on to question number 17. The provided URL for the Burbank Flight Path EA doesn't appear to work. Please share a link that does work. I think we can put that back up, that slide back up with the URL. I'm hoping. We did check it on the fly in response to this question, the team behind the scenes, and it did work. So please make sure that you're using the correct URL, including the underscores between air traffic and community involvement. Make sure that you have the right ones. That should be working just fine.
And I believe there's a link on our website to that project, isn't?
Okay, very good point. Okay. All right. Actually, this is the final question we currently have queued up. We are nearing the end of our 2-hour period. It is 7:49 now, but I'll go ahead and read this question. I just wanted to make mention of that. It is easy to understand your claim that the process of constructing the terminal will not increase plane noise directly. But is it possible that the new terminal could indirectly allow more planes to fly in and out because the gates will be farther apart and therefore allow more planes to be at the gates simultaneously. Perhaps that's one for you, Patrick.
Sure. So it's a little confusing because I think the assumption is that at the existing passenger terminal that there's some limitation on aircraft being at all 14 gates simultaneously, which is not true when we talk about design group 3 aircraft. And we are contemplating the replacement terminal to be to have an apron that accommodates design group 3 aircraft, which is our design group today. That's like a Boeing 737 or an Airbus A319 or 320, which are the aircraft like Southwest Airlines, for example, would use, or Alaska, or any of the ones operating today. So the answer would be no. There's not a problem having those types of aircraft at all 14 gates today. And the way we're contemplating the project, it would be the same design group 3 aircraft gates on the replacement passenger terminal. So it would be the same. It would be an identical condition.
That's right, Patrick. The wingtip clearance at the new terminal, the 14 hard stands are exactly 14 aircraft. You can't wedge in another one in between.
Okay. We did have another comment come in, so I'll go ahead and read this one. Thanks for taking the time to address the public. One of the largest frustrations with this process is that it's clear that the commercial needs of aviation have outweighed the needs of the community. How can we have a transparent conversation about rebalancing this so that we can have a productive dialogue? Every concern acknowledges the undue burden on aviation, and there is not equal weight given to the undue burdens of the community. Well, we appreciate the comments about taking the time to address the public. You know, as I mentioned, you know, having public input, both, you know, in the scoping process and throughout this process, and now in the EIS review stage is very, very important. Again, I can't underscore more the need that if you have additional comments on the EIS, to make sure that you make those part of the public record through the public hearing tomorrow night, or by sending them to us through the website, or by sending them to Advige directly through the mail. It's absolutely important, you know, that we have all of those issues out there and that we can address them there. Let's see if there, I don't see any other questions coming in. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and move on. Again, we are nearing the end of our 2-hour period. So I want to take a few minutes to remind everyone of some important information that we've talked about here tonight. Our virtual public hearing will occur tomorrow evening from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. To participate in the Zoom webinar for the public hearing, please be sure to register on the website. That website is www.bobhopeairporteis.com. Because it is a separate Zoom webinar, you must complete a separate registration from the one you did for this meeting tonight. There are 2 ways to participate at the public hearing. There are 2 different, and as a result, there's 2 different registration links. There is one registration link if you only wish to listen to the hearing. There is a second link if you wish to pre-register to speak at the public hearing. Pre-registration to speak will enable us to identify who the speakers are and who we need to unmute during the public hearing. If you registered to listen only, but you decide to speak during the public hearing, you may request to do so during the hearing. Instructions on how to do this will be provided during the hearing. I also want to remind you that the comment period on the draft EIS was scheduled to close on Monday, October 5th, 2020. However, the comment period is being extended until 5 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time on October 27th, 2020. Comments must be received by that time and date. I put special emphasis on the word received because any comments received after that date and time will not be considered in the final EIS. It is also important to remind everyone how to provide comments. There are 3 ways, and I just went over these a few moments ago. The first way is to comment, the first way to comment is via the public hearing tomorrow evening. If the public hearing is your preferred method of providing comments, please be sure to register to speak at that public hearing. The second way to comment is via the comment form on the website. That comment form has a 5,000 character limit, which is about 2 pages worth of text. So just be aware of that. The final method is to send us comments in the US mail. The address for sending comments is being shown on the screen, and the address is also shown on the website and on the cover of the EIS itself. And just to be clear, we had a question at the earlier workshop that yes, you can send them to us by FedEx or by UPS or other mail service that comes like the US mail. So that will work as well. So with that, as I said in the beginning, public input is a critical component of the NEPA process. We appreciate you taking time out of your evening to join us for our public workshop. We appreciate those who took the time to ask questions, and we hope that you found the responses useful. Thank you for participating. We will now conclude this public workshop. Please stay healthy, and we look forward to your continued interest in this important project. So good evening, everybody, and thank you again.